Overtourism occurs when too many tourists visit a single area, hindering that area's ability to properly manage the tourists. This leads to a lot of negative impacts for the area, including overcrowding, a strain on public infrastructure, the price of certain locations going up, a general feel of unease and annoyance for local people living in the area as well. Not only does overtourism negatively impact the people living in the areas, but it also negatively impacts the people visiting the areas. If too many tourists are visiting a single area, yeah, it makes sense that I, someone who lives in Japan, is going to feel the effects of it, but also you, person visiting Japan, are going to feel the effects of it. You want to check out Tokyo Skytree? Please wait 3 hours and also pay 10,000 more yen than you have to in the past. To a large extent, Japan is facing their own over-tourism crisis, and if you look at some of these stories that have been coming out from various media outlets, you'll find that not only is Japan experiencing crazy over-tourism, but it's also greatly damaging Japan as a whole. With a huge influx from tourism coming to Japan, certain problems are coming to light. Hotel prices are increasing, especially in popular areas like Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. And while it would make sense to have a sort of two-tiered hotel pricing system, a lot of places don't have the man hours or the know-how, or to be fair, really even care too much about creating that system. So these increased prices aren't only just for international tourists coming to Japan, it's also for just domestic tourists who are trying to get to Tokyo for a business meeting or something. There's also a negative impact on the locals, be it your train being overrun by suitcases if you're living on a popular line that goes to, I don't know, popular hotel areas or the airport or something like that. But even smaller things, if you're living or working near an area that's kind of popular or suddenly has gained popularity online, you'll find yourself kind of overrun with an influx of tourists, which honestly your area can't handle, and it makes just general daily life activities a lot more difficult. I used to live in West Tokyo. When I first moved to West Tokyo, there was kind of no one there, so it was easy to sort of travel around from A to B. But after a couple years of living there, it did get very, very congested. This is because areas like Nakano and Kichijoji and other areas along the Chuo line just became more and more popular. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just kind of a thing that's happening. I would say one of the biggest issues with over-tourism, especially over-tourism in Japan, is really bad behaving tourists. And I've mentioned bad behaving tourists on 2 separate videos. There's also a smorgasbord of videos you can check out on YouTube about tourists behaving badly. There was even a recent story about one stupid tourist that decided they were going to drink a strong zero off a grave. What the actual fuck is wrong with these people, seriously? The general public sentiment in Japan is 1, over-tourism is definitely happening and it's terrible, and 2, there should be some kind of a tiered system when it comes to international people coming to Japan versus people traveling domestically or people living and working in Japan. How would they manage to create that tier system? I'm not sure. Would that tier system be fairly spread out? I highly doubt it. Does that tier system currently exist? Yeah, kind of in certain locations, but it's not widespread enough like it is in other countries to actually make up for anything. Like I said before, hotel prices are the prices. There is no domestic travel discount. There's no show your residence card, get a cheeky discount. That doesn't exist. It's just the price is the price, pay it or basically, fuck off. When it comes to it, Japan needs tourism. Whether you love tourists, whether you hate them, whether you're some kind of a random no-profile picture loser making snide comments towards tourists online, either way, Japan needs tourists. You need them. The economy's not growing any quicker, the yen's been stagnant, we're getting a new prime minister again. In 2023, international visitors to Japan spent 5.3 trillion yen in the country. That is an insane amount of money and also a 10% increase from 2019, the last time these stats were taken before the corona pandemic. And you would think that because of the increased number of tourists coming to Japan, all the reports of over-tourism, the Japanese government would be locking down this tourist thing ASAP and in a hurry. Closing borders, locking down planes, making it harder for people to come to Japan. But that isn't the case. The Japanese government actually want to increase the amount of tourists who are currently visiting Japan. Their current targets are 60 million tourists by 2030. And in March 2025, ex-Prime Minister Ishiba released his groundbreaking plan to the cabinet to try and attract more visitors to Japan by 2030. So you've got to ask yourself, does Japan actually have an over-tourism problem? Well, the answer is simple: yes and no. It depends. Turns out the answer isn't simple at all. For those who are adamant that Japan has an over-tourism problem, let's have a look at the numbers. In 2024, 36 million international tourists came to visit Japan. That's a crazy number. And it was also a record-breaking number. It was the most tourists Japan had ever seen in a year. 47% more than any other year prior. And yeah, 36 million is a crazy number, but let's compare that number to some other countries. Let's take the UK, where I'm from. In 2024, the estimated number of internationals that visited the UK was 42 million. And doing a little simple math, we can find 42 is a bigger number than 36. I know. Hold your applause. Yes, I know, I did pass GCSE math. Out of those 42 million people who visited the UK, 20 million alone visited London, where I'm from. And let me tell you, London does feel like they're facing an over-tourism crisis. People are getting priced out, the city's very expensive, crime is insane right now. That's probably also due to the fact that we have like a massive gutting of like social services, and the Conservative Party has like rocked the country for the last like decade. But you know, that's neither here nor there. Let's focus on the over-tourism in Japan for the time being, shall we? But we can see at a glance, and compared to other countries, yes, Japan is facing an influx of tourists, but compared to other countries, it's not really facing that much of an influx. I know what you're thinking.
Oh, but Jordan, Tokyo's big and you're comparing it to London and Tokyo, it's not the same.
We'll do it again. Let's take another country. And I know a popular one to compare Japan to is Paris or France. France is crazy. People love to visit France. 48 million people visited France in 2024. Oh, sorry, my mistake. 48.7 million people visited Paris alone. Let me say that again. Paris alone received more international visitors in 2024 than the entirety of Japan. Now that 60 million number by 2030 that the Japanese government is targeting seems to make a lot more sense. In order for them to take as much advantage as they can of the international influx of travelers coming in, they want the most amount of people to come into Japan. So yeah, there are a lot of people visiting Japan currently, but is Japan facing an over-tourism problem? No, Japan isn't facing an over-tourism problem per se. Japan is facing a too many tourists are visiting the exact same 5 cities problem. Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Hokkaido, Fukuoka. These 5 prefectures receive 70% of the international inbound tourism market. 70% in these 5 prefectures, leaving every other prefecture in Japan to fight for scraps over the last 30%. Japan isn't facing an over-tourism problem. It's facing a problem of all the international tourists, well, 70% of the international tourists, visiting 5 areas. The issues actually don't stop there. In these 5 prefectures, most tourists are visiting the exact same areas. If I say to you, Kyoto Prefecture, where are people visiting? That's right, Kyoto City. And where are they going in Kyoto City? That's right, the main temples. There is such a concentration of tourists in the most popular locations in those prefectures. If you head off the beaten path and go to other areas in those 5 prefectures that aren't on a big map, or they're not areas that are particularly easy to get to, you will be bloody astonished at just the lack of people in those areas. For me personally, I love hiking. I love walking around, I love going to fun areas. I like getting off the beaten path and seeing cool stuff in Japan. And you'll find the further out you go on the train, just the less foreign faces you see. And yeah, it makes perfect sense. Everyone wants to see the big shrines, the major cities, that one cafe you saw on TikTok that had the really jiggly pancakes. Yeah, I get it. You want to go and see it. You've bookmarked it. You've got to check it out. But everyone is also searching for their own Japan, their own trip, something unique to their time in Japan that they can go back and brag about. But what is stopping international tourists from going out and just seeking that adventure for themselves? Well, compared to your hometown, the transportation system in Japan is amazing. Compared to London, the transport system in Japan is amazing. The trains are on time, the Shinkansen is fast, and honestly, it's pretty affordable. Even me, Jordan Green, living and working in Japan, making yen, going from A to B on my holidays isn't difficult, and it's not going to break the bank, you know? So what do I mean by transportation problems? Well, going to major cities is easy. I can take myself from Tokyo to Okayama like that. It's a Shinkansen ride away, and then I can take a walk to the station. If I wanted to, I could pop down, stay a night, come back on a Sunday, and be ready for work by Monday morning. It'll cost me all of, I don't know, maybe Yonman, maybe 40,000 yen. But if I want to go to, let's say, Shimane Prefecture, a prefecture that's basically right next door to Okayama, suddenly the challenges are a little more challenging. Because of the mountainous regions that border some of these prefectures, you can't just have a Shinkansen fly you from Tokyo to Okayama. And when you're traveling in Japan, sometimes you don't want to take a flight down, or sometimes you just don't have the time or the space. And while one could just fly from A to B, as an international tourist, sometimes you don't want to deal with the hassle and it's just easier to take the train. But taking the train from Okayama to Shimane, for example, is a grueling task. I recently did go to Shimane myself, and while most Japanese ticket buying websites are complete horseshit, this one wasn't terrible. It was in English, it was easy to understand to some extent, and it wasn't too difficult to grab my ticket. The issue came from picking up the physical ticket from Okayama Station. I arrived at Okayama Station 40 minutes before my train, knowing I had enough time to grab my ticket, grab a snack, and get on my mountain train to take me to Shimane Prefecture. However, in following the instructions given to me by the website, which was basically find the ticket machine, which had a little picture of which one I should use, put my card in the machine, the credit card I used to book the ticket, enter my secret PIN, the secret PIN I had entered myself when I bought the ticket, and then one should receive a ticket. However, the issue was, when I went to the machine and put my card in, the machine told me, "You're an idiot, this card doesn't work." Which is crazy, it's a Japanese card. Tried using my email instead, didn't work. Confused. I went to the station staff, why wouldn't I? Station staff, I proclaimed, help me, I need the ticket. My train is now leaving in about 30 minutes. I gotta get out of here. What'd I do? Station staff came over, we did the same thing. Card in, card out, pin in, pin out, email in, email out. Nothing, no ticket. I got about 15 minutes to my train now. Everyone's confused. Her supervisors come over. No one knows what the fuck is going on. The station staff says, do you know what? There's a separate ticket thing inside of the station. It's basically the exact same machine. Let's try that one instead. And lo and behold, it worked. And I got my ticket. I asked her, what is the difference between this machine and the one we had used before? And she said, absolutely nothing. There is no difference between these machines. Why did this one work and that one didn't? What the fuck is going on here? I had many questions and no time to ask them. Because I do speak Japanese, I could go to the station staff and ask them in Japanese, hey, the fuck's going on here? Help me out. And because we both spoke Japanese, we could get through the situation pretty quickly. But as an international tourist to Japan who doesn't speak that much Japanese, I would be freaking the fuck out. My train's leaving in 20 minutes, I can't get my ticket, no one speaks the language I speak. What the fuck do I do here, basically? It's a terrible situation to be in. And in this situation, the Japanese website was working perfectly okay. It was in English, the booking went through smoothly, I got my email that came in saying like the ticket was booked, everything was okay, but the hardware was still stuck in the 1980s. And that is a massive problem when it comes to traveling in Japan. The vast majority of time, not only will the station hardware not work how it's supposed to work, but also the software, the internet, the website, will not work. There was a video I saw a little while ago with Sea-Dog and Chris, and I believe they were taking the sleeper train from, A to B. And at the end of the video, Connor was lamenting that the website he was trying to use to book the sleeper train just didn't work. It wouldn't show his dates, it wouldn't show tickets, he was constantly refreshing the website to try and show like if there was anything available, and it's saying there wasn't, then it's saying there was again, and you had to load like 3 different pages to get the ticket eventually bought. It's an awful system, just terrible. And if I'm an international traveler to Japan, yeah, I want to get off the beaten path. I want to go check out other things, not just like the 5 big cities and a couple other smaller locations. But the issue is, Japan makes it so damn difficult to get off the beaten path. If I'm just an international traveler to Japan and I'm spending 5 days in Tokyo, and I've decided to spend 2 days in an adjacent prefecture, one at random, let's say Gunma, and if it's difficult for me to buy my tickets to get from Tokyo to Gunma, I'm not going to want to go to Gunma. If just getting a train from A to B is difficult, how am I going to exist in the prefecture for 2 days? The Japanese government need to spend a lot more time just kind of working out how can we shuffle these people outside of the big 5 prefectures to some of these other smaller locations, distant towns, interesting sites that are, just not in these 5 prefectures. And speaking of the Japanese government's plans, some domestic companies have understood the importance of getting international travelers out of these 5 big prefectures and on to some of these smaller, less traveled locations. We recently discussed Japan Airlines giving away free tickets to different locations in Japan as long as they flew, a return trip with Japan Airlines. The initiative was, as we said, just to facilitate some migration from the big prefectures to some of the lesser known ones, and also to try to ease that burden of over-tourism on these big areas. The Japan Airlines started a year ago in September 2024, but that wasn't the last time we saw Japan Airlines getting involved in domestic and international tourism. October 2024 saw Japan Airlines once again put their money where their mouth was and introduce a new policy to migrate some of these international visitors out of the big prefectures to some small areas. However, this time they were paired with Hoshino resorts. This was a massive hidden gems campaign by the two companies. They basically promoted smaller, lesser known locations in Japan that had Hoshino resorts hotels in them. Areas up and down the coast from Aomori all the way down to Kyushu. This was a massive campaign. It was on Instagram, there were website features, billboards and such. But were these campaigns effective? I would say no. These campaigns started last year in 2024. We are now in 2025, and according to every newspaper article I've seen on this topic, over-tourism is worse than ever. And rightfully so. Hoshino Resorts, Japan Airlines, yeah, these are big known companies in Japan. But outside of Japan, how well are they really known? If I'm coming to Japan for the first time ever, I'm already going to have some kind of an itinerary planned. The itinerary probably looks like Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, and then maybe like 1 or 2 other locations. But have those 1 or 2 other locations been influenced by Japan Airlines or Hoshino Resorts? Probably not. The whole campaign needs a bigger push. It needs a governmental hand to get in and subsidize some of these transportation links. And I get it, this whole thing is like create a 2-tier system, we gotta make sure tourists are paying more because they're visiting the country, blah 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 blah. Yeah, that makes sense in areas like Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, Hiroshima, Fukuoka. But in areas like Niigata, Tottori, Shimane, international visitors to Japan aren't going there anyway. Give them a subsidized train ticket to visit these smaller areas. You will receive twice your money back in the money they spend in the prefecture. Domestic travelers to Japan and international travelers to Japan spend very differently. As a domestic traveler myself, when I'm traveling to a new area, yeah, I want to experience all the area has to offer. But I live here. I pay tax here. I plan to be here for at least 10 more years. I can go back again. If I go to Shimane and I don't see that one thing I wanted to see, I'll just go back. I live here. It's not hard. For an international traveler to Japan, if they're visiting Aomori, they have no idea when they're gonna be in Aomori again. They're gonna make the most of it. Oh, we'll just come back next time. When? If it's gonna cost me an extra 5,000 yen to go from A to B so I can also see C, I'm gonna do it. Because when I was an international traveler here, I did that. International travelers are on a race against time when they're visiting Japan, but they've also saved and they're here to have a good time. The Japanese government need to spend more time investing in ways to get the international tourists out of these locations. Not only will it help these smaller locations, it'll also lessen some of that over-tourism that's happening in the biggest locations in Japan.
One thing, I'm not a big fan of the government.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the Japanese government isn't working hard to try to mitigate some of that over-tourism that's happening in Japan. because they are. And just like Japan Airlines, they're putting their money where their mouth is. In the supplementary budget for the fiscal year of 2024, the Japanese government allocated 15.82 million Japanese yen for emergency measures for preventing and mitigating over-tourism and improving the receptive environment for foreign visitors. It currently accounts for around 15% of the fiscal budget for 2025. So the Japanese government is doing something about it, and they are putting money into getting international visitors to move to smaller areas, but also in these bigger areas to go and visit other things outside of the 10 to 15 locations they want to visit and jiggle pancakes. I don't know. And while the Japanese government is focusing on a more macro approach to avoiding over-tourism, smaller bodies of government, local businesses, and some pretty big international businesses too are focusing on spreading those tourists around using, of course, the government funding. So you take, and then you spread. That's how you do it. That's beautiful. The Japan Tourism Agency, for example, is implementing their own sustainability program targeted at international tourists. Very similar to the government program, it is trying to mitigate some of this over-tourism in these most saturated areas of Japan. But this isn't just a, hey, you go over there plan. They're talking to local governments, stakeholders, and cities and asking them, what do they think is the best way to move some of these people around? But the money doesn't stop there. They're also spending more money on influencer marketing to try to promote some of these lesser known areas of Japan. The Japanese government is very slowly understanding that while their generation may read guidebooks and check the local poster boards for places to visit, the younger generation, we're checking TikTok. We're seeing what is our favorite influencer doing and where they're visiting. That's how we get our travel recommendations. And realizing this, they're putting more money towards influencer tourism and marketing. And they're sending your favorite influencer to some of these lesser known locations to try and move some of the tourists to more interesting, unique locations. But still, the transportation issue is going to be there. And I think until Japan can really buckle down and work out how do we create smoother transportation links that work for everyone? And in 2025 Japan, we're slowly seeing that. While there used to only be physical pass modes and IC travel cards, recently you can download said IC travel card onto your phone. And I know that's not a crazy step for most international people coming to Japan. We've had, touch train things on our credit cards for years now, but for Japan, that's a massive leap in the right direction. And speaking of leaps in the right direction, they've gone one step further in recent years. You now can also just use your credit card at certain gates to tap yourself in and out of the station. And once again, this isn't groundbreaking stuff. They're not reinventing the wheel of any of this. They're just sort of doing things that other countries have done before, doing things that make sense. And I'm glad for it. I'm glad they're moving in the right direction. The easier they make it for people to move out of these big locations, the less it will feel like the areas are being bogged down by international visitors. Japan is moving in the right direction. They're making traveling from A to B to C a lot easier, and they're trying to move some of these tourists around from those big cities to smaller areas. We love that. Recently, 80 million yen was given to Kumamoto Prefecture to promote the region to both international and domestic tourists, and to get people who are already visiting Fukuoka just to take that train down to Kumamoto. If you've never been Kumamoto, definitely go. Great location, really good ramen. They have horse meat. Give it a try. They've got all the One Piece statues. It's where Ichido orders from. Check it out. But is Japan being affected by over-tourism? Yeah. In these bigger areas, Japan is getting ransacked by over-tourism. Bad mannered tourists, massive lines, the trains are really overcrowded. The concentration of tourists in a few individual areas in these locations are making it a lot harder for residents, but also other international tourists who are just here to visit Japan and have a good time. But also know there are certain areas of Japan that need tourism. Stagnant economies, empty streets, beautiful towns, but no one there to visit them. And you'll be surprised if you head off that beaten track and go to an area that you've never been before in Japan. And I'm talking to you, both international tourists coming to visit Japan and also domestic tourists, lives and works here. If you're in Japan, check out some of these off the beaten path locations, you'll be surprised by not only how absolutely mind-bogglingly beautiful they are, but just how many people aren't there. It's pretty insane. But guys, I'm gonna love you and leave you there. If you think Japan is experiencing over-tourism, let me know in the comments down below. Is your home country experiencing over-tourism? Let me know as well. Pretty interested to see how this is affecting you as an international tourist and also a domestic tourist. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next one. See you.